Welcome, everyone. It's Tammy Mastroberte of Elevated Existence. And joining me today is going to be the cover story of our December 2017 issue of Elevated Existence magazine. And it is best-selling author Cheryl Richardson. She has written a number of books, including The Art of Extreme Self-Care and You Can Create an Exceptional Life, which she co-wrote with Hay House founder Louise Hay. And today we're actually talking about a brand new book that really is much more of a personal type of project. And it's in a journal format, and it's called Waking Up in Winter, in Search of What Really Matters in Midlife. So join me in welcoming Cheryl. Thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on the new book.
Well, thanks, Tammy. It's great to be here with you, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I love the journal format. I have to say I devoured like the whole book because it was just these short entries, and it just flew past me.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that you start off in the book saying that you were working on a different type of book and it just wasn't flowing easily. And then your husband actually decided to, recommended this journal format. So can you share with readers kind of what you were hoping people would take from it and why you decided to go with that journal format?
Yeah, I do have my husband to either thank or kill afterwards. I'm not sure which one.
Right.
But not really kill, but maybe like really harass for a while.
Right.
No, I knew it was, I wanted to write a new book. I knew it was time to work on a book. And I had been going back and forth, as I often do when I work on books. Um, Usually when I start a book, I'm going back and forth about what do I really want to write about? What am I inspired to write about? And I was really struggling with this one. And my husband, one night, we were out to dinner with friends, and he just said to me, I don't know why you just don't publish one of your journals. You love May Sarton, and May Sarton is a writer who wrote a series of journals along with nonfiction, other types of nonfiction, fiction, and poetry. He said, you've always loved May Sarton. You've devoured all of her journals. Why don't you just publish one of your journals? And I just was like, in that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, why haven't I even ever thought of that? And then, of course, I thought, what are you, out of your mind? I'm not going to publish one of my journals. No way. But I kind of sat with the idea. And over time, what I realized was I decided to just let the idea incubate. And I went back and I looked at all of my books. Again, as I often do when I'm writing, I go back and revisit wherever, because my books tell the story of my own journey. I mean, anybody who's read my books knows that I write from my own experience. I'm writing about what I'm working on in my own life. And I realized that the truth was I didn't have another self-help book in me. I felt like every day I feel like we get emails and web info with plenty of advice and how to. Everybody's, the internet has given us access to so much information about improving our lives that I'm overwhelmed half the time.
Mm.
And I'm really interested in staying tethered to my inner life. I always have been. And I'm interested in the deeper journey of living deeply. And I always have been. And journaling is a big part of that for me. And so I decided to take a journal that I had been keeping and go back and revisit it. And when I did, very carefully over a long period of time, I realized that what I wanted for my readers next was to actually experience what it's like to live an awake, deep, committed to growth kind of life by showing them how I do it rather than telling them what, not telling them what to do. I don't like to think of it that way, but rather than giving them, 7 steps to fixing something, I'm like over that.
Mm.
Not that it's bad. I mean, it works. It's, my books have had a great impact. There's plenty of other people's books that have had great impact, but personally, I needed to be inspired as a writer. Sorry, the sunlight's coming in. I needed to be inspired as a writer. Maybe that's a good sign.
Yeah.
And I just decided that I was going to write a journal. So what do I hope people get? I hope people, first of all, know that they're not alone in their journey, right? I hope that when you read it, when you read it, I hope that you realize, oh, you know what? I'm not the only one that feels that way. I'm not the only one that's worrying about that or afraid of that or secretly desiring that. or questioning that, which, as you know, is a big part of the journal. So I want people to know they're not alone. I want people to experience through my eyes what it's like to live life as a schoolroom, to live life as a school where everything that happens is an opportunity for growth and evolution. And I also, I think on a bigger scale, just want people to know what it's like to go through the hero's journey, which is a period of descent where you start questioning everything in your life, and then you find yourself locked into this mysterious place where you have no idea where you're headed, but you can't go back, and you're scared out of you're either scared out of your mind or you're confused, and then eventually emerging into a new life that reflects who you've become. And that's sort of the journey. And I didn't know I was taking that journey until I finished the journal, and then went back and reread it and began to edit it just so that for clarity, and thought, my God, look at what this period of my life was. And it was really prompted, by Michael, but of course also when I looked back, the death of Debbie Ford, who was a colleague of mine, a dear friend, a soul sister. I was deeply affected by her death, and because I had this really bizarre opportunity to sit with her on her deathbed bed.
Yes.
And she and I, traveled a lot together. We did similar, I mean, we were both coaches and everything. And, some of the things she said to me at the end of her life, I could not listen to. I mean, it was very powerful. And when I went back and looked at this journal, I thought, yes, I want to publish this. I'm really scared to publish it because it's a true journal. But I just knew as an artist, it was the next form of art that I wanted to bring to the world. And I knew it deep in my bones, so that it didn't matter whether it worked or not. I knew this was the next contribution I was supposed to make, and that's what I did.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, it is very personal. You really share, like, this is what you did today, and this is, you were in a therapy session, or you really share. And through sharing that, what I have found is people can pull lessons that you have learned. So you are teaching, but you're still teaching, but you're teaching through your own experience, and I think people can connect with that.
Yeah, that's what some of the early readers of the book have said, which makes me really happy. Let's see if I can fix this a little bit, maybe. Which makes me really happy is, people have said that, wow, just by reading your story and, or reading about what happens to you and what you discover, it makes me go, oh, for crying out loud, I need to do that too. Or that was a moment of a revelatory moment for me as well. Or wow, I'm not alone in thinking that, and here's what I need to do next in order to take care of myself. That's what I really wanted, and so far it seems like that's what's happened, and I'm really glad about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And another thing that I thought was interesting, you say it in the book, but I think it's been said that you kind of teach what you need to learn, right? We all wind up becoming fascinating and teach, if we're teaching about things, we're teaching about things that we also need to know. And in the book, as you're kind of going through your different journal entries, you are really, you have written so much and taught so much about self-care and about, taking care of ourselves and paying attention to what our needs are and making sure our needs are met. And what was interesting is, as you were kind of working through the different journal entries, you see that you started really learning that maybe you weren't doing some of these things in your own life. So can you share some of the messages that you got from your kind of like the little subtle hints that you got from your own mind and body that kind of were making you know that you needed to focus on your own self-care more, and kind of how they showed up? Because I think there's a lot in there that someone can take from that.
Well, I think first of all, we do teach what we need to learn. I think we teach best what we need to learn. And also, I think that when I look back at the beginning of that journey, I was traveling a lot. I was busy doing, I was juggling a lot of things in my life, like a lot of us do. And the thing that I've learned about coaching people for 25 years is that We all, life is like a roller coaster ride, and we go through different periods in our life where things are stressful and we all regress. We forget what we've learned, and suddenly, so we forget what we learned and we find ourselves getting stuck in ways we used to get stuck. When that happens, when you learn to really listen to your life and to pay attention to what's going on, and this is what I'm this is what I demonstrate in this book, life starts to give you signs that let you know, oh, I need to pay attention to this. So, for example, in the beginning of the book, I remember I was traveling, I think I was in Germany, and this young woman wanted to interview me about self-care. And she was really nervous about, writing about self-care because it appeared to be a very selfish thing. Um, there wasn't even a phrase in German for self-care, and she was really concerned about that. And we had this conversation. I was having this conversation with her as this, I'm not going to say beginner, but she was, a lot younger than I was. And this whole concept of taking care of herself was a new concept to her in a way that it wasn't to me. And during our conversation, our interview, I walked away and realized, oh my God, some of the things that she was talking to me about and some of the things, the advice I was giving her was the advice I needed to pay attention to, that I wasn't paying attention to that in my life. It reminded me of my first coach, Thomas Leonard, used to always say to me, he would say, Cheryl, when you're coaching clients, your clients will always be one step ahead of you or one step behind you. So pay attention to what's going on in their lives. And I remember when I was interviewing with this woman, doing this interview with the woman, I remember thinking, there's a reason she's in my life right now, and there's a reason she's asking me these questions. And it really made me step back and go, wow, where am I not practicing what I've been teaching for a long time? And that really began me starting to pay attention to, oh, I'm frustrated. Oh, I don't want to get on another plane. Or, oh, I'm feeling impatient. Or I'm starting to feel this kind of low grade anxiety. That certainly happened after I turned 50. I just started to feel this anxiousness, very low grade, but this kind of anxiousness. And it helped me to see that, once again, because I was experienced enough to know I needed to pay attention to my own self-care, and I needed to listen to the voices that were saying, you don't want to travel as much. It's the same voices we all hear, like, you're not really happy at this job, or my marriage isn't what I think it could be. Or, that friend really drains my energy every time we get together. But instead of ignoring the voices, which a lot of us do, I know enough not to ignore them. And that's really what I'm saying in the book. Really, it's a lot of what I'm saying in the first half is pay attention to where you're uncomfortable, unhappy, anxious, um, just irritated or feeling resentful. Like, life gives us little clues. And then life is always also trying to show us the path, a path toward salvation, if you will, a path to self-care and a path to restoring ourselves. And that's really what I started to follow. So
Yeah, and you kind of, as it evolves, you start realizing, maybe the things that I wanted before in my life are not the same things that I want now. And that was sort of that revelation that you started getting based on those signs and signals that you were reading. And you started realizing that you wanted to do things that mattered more to your soul, is one of the things you explained. So I think a lot of people go through these transitions in their lives where they all of a sudden realize they're not happy doing what used to make them happy before. So do you have kind of any advice that you can give to other people when they're faced with a situation like that, on how you kind of navigated it, and how they can also navigate that?
well, all positive change begins with telling the truth about our lives. So the first thing we need to do is really face the truth. And that's a lot of what I do in the beginning part of the journey. Is I start really reevaluating, am I happy? Am I happy doing the work that I do? I mean, I was very successful. I've been very blessed with a lot of success and the opportunity to reach and teach a lot of people and to have a lot of people read my books. And so there was a big part of me saying, who are you to even question that? I mean, you've had the kind of success that a lot of people dream about. You can't begin to question that. but I had to question it. I had to question, just everything that I was doing in my life. So, and as you know, because you read the book, I mean, I begin to question everything. I question my marriage. I question my work. I question, I question my writing. I mean, that's how this book began. And I think we all do that. So the first thing is to really be brave enough to start questioning things. You don't have to do it all at once, and you don't have to make any changes. I mean, I always say that to people. Just telling the truth is the first step. It doesn't mean you have to act on that truth. Once you tell the truth, it's like the universe starts opening doors, starts inviting you to take steps towards to a life that feels more aligned with who you are. I mean, listen, hopefully we're all growing and evolving. If you're somebody who checks under the hood and makes sure that, really cares about who you are and how cares about changing your life, making positive changes, then you're not going to stay the same. I mean, hopefully, please God, we don't stay the same. We grow and evolve as people. That means the circumstances, the situations in our lives are either going to need to rise up to meet us, or sometimes they need to fall away. The first step is to be able to really begin with just one area of your life and say, am I really happy with the work that I'm doing? Am I really happy where I live? Am I happy in my significant relationship if I have one? Am I happy? How's my relationship with my family, with my friends, those sorts of things. And then once you start to get an idea of what maybe needs to change, then, I always just, I believe in energy. We are energy, all of us. And I just start to put out to life that, I'm ready for something different. I'm ready to start doing things differently. And believe it or not, it doesn't have to be anything massive. For me in the journal, I start talking about, I start working less. I start making some different choices. I start really reevaluating some of my relationships. I start reevaluating the relationship with my husband and the kind of time I'm spending with him. I mean, I write a lot of, God bless him for letting me write about our marriage, because, he's a writer too, and he's deeply committed to the truth. And when I gave him the book to read, at first, I was like, because I'm writing about marriage and sex and connection and lack of connection, like whatever it might be. And there was only like a couple of minor changes that he had me make. Otherwise, he said to me, you know what, it's the truth. And so this is what life is like. This is what marriage is like. And I want you, to be able to write about the truth. So telling the truth is the first step. And then beginning to just make small self-care changes, which for most people means doing less, being with oneself more. A lot of the journal is about paying attention to, what does my soul want right now? Because too often we think the voice in our head is the soul, but it's not. It's the busy mind. And we have to learn how to stop listening to the voice in our head that we think is the boss, and listen more deeply to the voice of the soul. And that only happens when you slow down and get quiet. And that's what I really needed to do.
Yeah.
There's a point in the book where my coach, Ellen, who I was speaking with in the middle of the mystery part of the hero's journey, where I'm thinking, I don't know where the hell I'm headed. I don't know what's going to happen to me, my writing, my work, my life, whatever. And I feel like I'm just, wandering. And when she says to me, your meandering has purpose, an important moment for me, because it basically said to me, sit in the mystery for a while, be quiet, listen to yourself deeply. Don't listen to everybody else. Don't try and find the answers out there, which is what most of us do. Listen deeply to yourself and let your soul lead you. And then that's, ultimately that's what we need to do. When we listen, we get guidance. The big thing is about listening. So I always say to people, start with 10 minutes a day. Set an alarm on your phone or set an alarm on your computer. Sit your butt down, close your eyes, focus on your breath, and make yourself stay there for 10 minutes. And when your mind starts telling you all the reasons why you can't stay there, and it will be really clever with those reasons. Like, oh my God, I think an intruder just came through the door. It's ridiculous.
Right.
You need to be able to say to that mind, you need to be able to say to yourself, my soul is far more important than my crazy mind. and I'm staying here and I'm not getting up until that alarm goes off. And if you do that for about 2 weeks, you start to really get comfortable with yourself. And you find that that 10 minutes expands to 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Sometimes I'll sit for 10 minutes, the alarm will go off, I'll shut it off, and I'm in such a deep place, I'll stay there. And an hour and a half later, I'm like, holy mackerel, I can't believe that much time has gone by. And I love it. It's very, very peaceful and nurturing. And it allows us to connect to important wisdom.
Yes. And throughout the book, what I love as well is as we're following your journey and kind of learning how to apply different things to our own lives and resonating with things in our own lives, you kind of also, in telling what you're doing that day, you give examples of kind of nuggets of an exercise that someone can use, or something that they can take and immediately apply to their own life. And something that jumped out at me is you were talking about it was your birthday, and that on your birthday you always look at your previous year's journal and look at the intentions that you set, and then kind of review it to think, okay, well, what has happened so far with these intentions? And it's just a practice that you do every year, which I loved. So can you share how this works and what benefits you actually get from that? Because I think that's such an amazing exercise on taking that reflection and taking a moment to question the past year and then where you're headed now.
Yeah, so throughout the book, basically what I'm doing is I'm just sharing, again, it's writing in a journal. So I'm talking about something that I might have learned in therapy. I'm talking about something I might have learned from a friend, or some exercise that I do, like the birthday ritual. And sometimes just even in journaling, um, there's something that I do in the journal that becomes this really, like, there's one point in the journal where I'm somebody who's done dream work in the past, where I used to keep a dream journal, and I would really use my dreams to help me connect with what was going on in the unconscious. And there was one point in the journal where I took an outside object, and so not an object from my dream, but I talk about honey, and how honey had become this big thing for me. And in my, like, I would buy different kinds of honey. I started to use honey in my tea now and then. I had never used it before. I went to Hamburg, Germany, and they were serving me all these great honeys. And I'm like, what is it with honey? I ended up doing this great exercise about honey, like free association about what honey means. And when I finish, I discover, holy mackerel, this is exactly what's going on. It was a reflection. The reason it was so important to me was because it was the aspects of honey were a complete reflection of what was going on in my life. And that was like a very cool exercise to suddenly discover. The birthday ritual is something that my friend Julie, I've been friends with Julie since I was about 18 years old, so a long time. Julie taught me this exercise when we were young girls. Every year, she would write in her journal, she'd make a list of 10 intentions, 10 things that she wanted to have happen in her life. And then the following year, she'd go back to the 10 intentions, and she'd see how many of them actually came true. And she would write in her journal about which intentions happened, which intentions didn't, and maybe why they didn't, and maybe why they weren't in her best interest after all. And then she would, in a sense, that journal entry would be a gift to herself, like a letter to herself. And then she would set 10 new intentions for the next year, the upcoming year. And so I do that every birthday. And I've done that for almost 40 years now. And so it just so happens that this journal falls during my birthday. So I happen to write about going back and reviewing the journal before. So it's a beautiful way of not only saying, here's a great exercise for you to try, but it's also saying, it's showing you this is what the exercise looks like in real time, in real life. And this is the benefit that I get out of it. This is what I discover. And if you do the exercise, you might have some personal revelations yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I know that jumped out at me, only because it's something that I've done and seen amazing benefits from as well, is you talk a little bit about past life regression therapy.
Yeah.
And you talk about how you've done it many times before, but during this particular journal entry where you were talking about it, you had gone back to an experience where you were a mother and you were starving, you couldn't feed your child. Can you share a little bit, because I think it's such an important tool that we have available to us. So can you share a little bit about how past life regression therapy has helped you and has become this kind of tool to open you up to things in your life?
Well, it's interesting. Again, when I went back through the journal, I personally had to make a commitment that um, I was going to be true to the journal and to what happened during this period in my life. And I was really nervous about including that section because, it's a different form of therapy, but it is something that I was really blessed. Brian Weiss is a dear friend of mine, and I met Brian, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago. I was a volunteer at one of his events and I met him. And I have no doubt we've traveled many lifetimes together now. And back then, and I write about this in the journal about specifically to help the reader have context for what's going to happen. Back then, I had an experience with past life regression therapy. I went to see a psychologist that Brian had recommended who was really, really skilled in this form of therapy. And this was after I had read Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian, which is an awesome book. And I usually have 10 copies in my library and I give them out to people all the time. It's such a good book. Everybody needs to read it. And it's essentially his memoir. It's about how he came to do this work, right? And so I have, so at that time in my life, after reading that book and after meeting Brian, I did 6 or 8 months worth of regression therapy, and it was incredibly helpful. And it didn't matter whether it was real or not. I mean, today, now I understand from quantum physics and science, I believe everything is happening all at once, and that we are, I believe that, we can tap into slivers of our consciousness is having billions of experiences, I think. And so in this particular journal, as part of this hero's journey, this period of being in the mystery, when I was really struggling, um, I, I, the therapist I was working with during this journal, Sylvia was her name, is a wonderful psychologist who also does past life regression therapy. She's a wonderful therapist and somebody who uses both traditional, like internal family systems therapy, highly skilled at that, IFS, but she also uses regression therapy. And so I, in working with her, decided to use some of the regression therapy in addition to the other work that we were doing together. And it's funny because that the particular regression that I write about, and I'm not going to share it here because you have to really read it to experience it. Out of context, it doesn't have the power that it has. What was interesting though, Tammy, I will say this is going back and editing that so that it made sense to the reader. When you do past life regression therapy, when you do deep work in that way, and if you've done this work, you know this. If you write about the experience, when you go back and you read what you've written, the consciousness of that experience, the energy of that experience is revisited. So each time you read it, it's just much like with dream work. You can go back and read a dream in a journal and be influenced by it, affected by it, the energy of the experience. Several times I would go back to that entry because it's a tough entry, right? I would go back and I would go to edit it and I would have to stop because I would start to just relive that experience. But each time I did, I healed another little piece and healed another little piece, which is what happens. And by the time I was done, I understood on a very deep level what that experience was about. And so what I want to say is, so I was really nervous about keeping that in the journal. And what's so fascinating to me is several of the early readers have all commented on that experience and how powerful it was for them, how emotional it was for them, and how just instructional in some ways it was for them. So it's a form of therapy I absolutely believe in. I love Brian's work. It's been enormously helpful to me. I think it's a great form of therapy that can help people deal with some pretty difficult things in a very rapid fashion.
Yes.
You know, I don't think it's the be all and the end all. It's a part of it's a piece of, it's a kind of therapy to do. Um, but it can have some very, very dramatically powerful healing effects when you do it. And I'm glad now. I'm so glad that I had to include it. I mean, I'm writing about the truth. You know, that's just what I'm doing. And so this is what I do in my life. I'm like my biggest experiment.
Yes. Yes. No, absolutely. And I mean, it jumped out at me. Number one, it was a very poignant and emotional piece. But because I am familiar with past life regression therapy, I'm glad that you added it in there, because I think it is, for those people that have experienced it or have even heard about it, it really is such an effective tool, I think, that we have available to us in this physical world. So I was just really happy to read your experience with it, because it shows the power that it can have.
Yeah, and what's great is you don't even have to believe it for it to be true. The interesting thing is when you do regression work with somebody who's really skilled at that, there's a knowing that you feel deep within you, that it's not an intellectual knowing. It's an experiential knowing that that what's happened is it has some kind of a powerful effect on you. And there are times even when you're doing it where, you know, a conscious part of you goes, this is crazy, like, is
Yeah.
this real, what's going on? But you're in such a deep place and you're feeling so deeply that it's healing anyway. And then when you come out, I mean, once you have a regression experience that's a true regression experience, and you feel the truth of the experience, it doesn't, you know, you're a believer and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
And
100%.
that's like, you know, the experience itself is sort of isn't the point. The point is the healing that happens as a result of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And throughout, like I said, throughout the book, you kind of you have this quite, you know, where you're constantly questioning yourself, your thoughts, the signs that you're receiving, the feelings that you're feeling. So you really demonstrate kind of this reflective year that you had.
Mhm.
And I know in one of you said you shared a lot, you know, different experiences that you had with your husband, and then when you were, you know, showing it to him, you were thinking, oh my gosh, I wrote about this. And one of the things that you shared was this, you know, this big argument that you guys had in a restaurant that ended, and you wound up not talking to each other for 3 days.
Yeah.
And so within that, again, it was kind of like another thing that was showing you that you need to remember how to express your needs, and you need to remember how to kind of make sure that your needs are being met, and that you're not perfect, and that, you know, and I love that. I love when I think authors who are known out there will say, like, listen, this stuff happens to me too, you know what I mean? And I love the fact that you were real with that. So I just want to ask, what did you kind of learn from that process, and throughout, about your relationship? Because you share a lot of different things about your relationship.
Yeah.
What have you learned through this reflective process that you're hoping will enlighten other people as well?
Well, yeah, that fight that we had, I remember I wrote a blog about it, and I think I say so in the journal that I'd written a blog about it. And part of what happened was I had journaled about the experience. We had had this big fight, and the fight was really, it looked like it was about like a house project that Michael had talked about, but it was really about something much deeper, which was the fact that I wasn't talking about the things that were bothering me or the needs that I wanted to get met. And because I was busy and I wasn't even connected, I wasn't even aware of some of the needs that I had going on that I needed support with. And so, and that's been a pattern of mine. I think it is for a lot of women, but it's certainly been a pattern of mine. And so by the time we were in a restaurant having dinner and he brings up a house project, and I just, you know, I'm like, I, in my mind, I lose it, but I just say something like sarcastic and just not very polite. You know, I forget what it was. It's in the book, but and then that just, you know, he gets pissed, and then I get pissed, and he just like goes off in his corner. And yeah, so for 3 days we didn't talk, and I write about that whole experience. And what I learned from it was that and I'm glad you said what you did. A lot of times people, when you're in the public eye, when you're a teacher, it's natural for people to project onto you. That's just what part of what we project onto each other all the time. And it's very easy for people to see me on a Facebook Live or to see me in an interview like this and to think that I've got it all together. And if you see me in an event, if you come to a retreat of mine, for example, you will quickly learn I do not have it all together. And I've never said I have it all together. And if you read any of my books, I'm the first person to tell you I'm here growing and learning right alongside of you. And that's really what this book is showing. And I want people to know that I don't want to be in any pedestal. It's a long way down, trust me. And I want people to know that there are times where I don't behave very nicely either. And I can be a real bitch. And, especially to Michael, because he's the closest one to me, right? We tend to take our close loved ones for granted. That's one of the important things I learned, that you know what? And you can see that through this whole journal. And my relationship with Michael today is so reflective of the work that was done during that journal period, where I began to pay attention to how do I behave when I'm not getting my needs met? Like I get sarcastic and nasty and resentful. That's not good. It's not good for my body. It's not good for my marriage. It's not good for my work. And I also learned something that I think, again, we all need to learn as women, how important it is to stay connected to what we need and to ask to have our needs met before they've built up and we're walking around, in a chronic state of resentment. And I have to say that from that experience, I wrote about it in my journal because I was just trying to work through what happened. And again, it happens to fall into this year, this period of the journal that I decide to publish. And I can honestly say now, quite a while after that experience, that for the most part, I'm much better at being connected to what I need. The minute I start to feel any kind of resentment, I know, whoa, hold on a second. What do I need here? I need some kind of support. I need to open my mouth and just talk about what's going on for me so that it doesn't come out sideways at dinner in a nasty tone, which, I'm probably the only one in the world that does that, but.
Oh yeah, no, you're not, believe me.
I could be.
Oh my goodness.
And I want to say, the other thing you learn is, as a woman, being connected to my needs and talking about my needs, not waiting, not piling them up inside, putting them in a corner and waiting for something to blow, allows you to have a deeper, more intimate and fulfilling connection with your partner. And that's really important to me. My marriage is really important to me. It always has been. I haven't always treated it in the way that it has felt important to me. But the older I get, the more I really, he's my family first. And, he's my primary family. And that relationship needs attention and care before anything else, except for my own self-care, my own life. That comes first for me, as it does for Michael. And then our marriage is the next in line. And when you treat a marriage as something precious, and as not coincidental, by the way, there's no coincidence Michael and I are together. There's no coincidence that, we piss each other off the way that we do, because there's opportunities for growth here. I remember, and I think I even put this in the book, Harville Hendrix. I think I wrote it in the journal when Harville Hendrix said one time, you will be pretty much guaranteed to marry the person who is the least capable of meeting your most important needs.
Yes.
And on one hand, I thought, okay, buckle up, right? And on the other hand, I thought, really? Shoot, I don't want that. And it's true. And it's because it gives us an opportunity to grow. And
Yeah.
that's really what marriage is. It's the ultimate spiritual school, that's for sure. At least my marriage has been.
Yes, no, I agree. I think any romantic love relationship is it's hardest to be spiritual there than anywhere else, I think.
Yeah.
So another nugget that I got from the book is you were talking about your father and him having cataract surgery. And you kind of just mentioned that, he was very nervous and you decided to use this coaching technique on him called you messages.
Yeah.
And it just jumped out at me. And I thought I just wanted to ask if you can explain to to the audience what exactly that technique is and how that works.
Yeah. So my dad was having cataract surgery, and he wasn't well, and it's a little hard for me to talk about him because this is the week a year ago he died this week.
Oh
Um,
my goodness, I'm so sorry.
yeah, that's okay. Thank you, thank you. He's out of pain. He was suffering, and I'm so grateful for that. That makes it easier in some way. But we were going through cataract surgery together. I was taking him through it. My dad was deaf, so I needed I was there with him in pre-op and communicating for him, um, and uh, and yeah, it was interesting. They had him hooked up to all these monitors and stuff, and he was nervous. He was scared. I mean, it's scary to have your eyes operated on because you see what's going on, and well, at least you do until they take care of the optic nerve and you're not actually watching them. But so yeah, it was interesting because I kept saying to him, "You're doing okay, Dad. It's only going to be a minute." I was just holding his hand through the whole process. You're doing all right. Uh, and then I thought, oh, there's this old coaching technique. So he's hooked up to a heart monitor, and I can see his heart rate's high. I can see that he's feeling anxious. And every now and then I'd say, it's going to be okay, and I would see the heart rate go down a little, but then it would spike up again. And then I remembered, as a coach, there's something called you messages, which is, you're a really great interviewer, Tammy. Like you're a very compassionate woman. Now, you don't BS anybody, but the point is you start the message with you communicate with you. So instead of saying, it's going to be okay, Dad, we're almost done, I started saying, you're really strong and resilient. You're incredibly patient, Dad. You have a body that heals very quickly. You are going through this like a champ, like, whatever it might be. And I would watch his heart rate start to go down, and then it would stay down. And the more I used you messages, we used to say as coaches that when you use you messages, when you really see who somebody is and you mirror that for them, it's like speaking to their heart instead of their head. And so I didn't just go, you're really strong, Dad. My dad's very strong. Like, I really paid attention to what's true about him. You're incredibly resilient. That was hands down truthful. You are incredibly patient. Like, the stuff this man went through for his health, I don't know if I could go through it. You know, your body heals like nobody I know. Truth. So I was looking for what was true, and I was just putting you in front of it. And it was so interesting because I had the kind of scientific evidence right in front of me that his heart rate was going down and it was staying down as a result. So, yeah, it was an interesting little experiment that got us through a difficult time, and fortunately, he came through the operation with flying colors, and like he always did, such a trooper,
Mm.
and got his vision back. So
Yeah, no, fantastic. I just thought that, and that's really like an example, I think, of what people can see in this book is that they go on this reflective journey, but there are these kind of nuggets in there of teaching. And you're teaching through explaining your own life, which I loved. And then at the end of the book, I just want to let everybody know, you actually do have a list, a series of questions that people can, at once they get to the end of the book, can kind of apply what you've learned. You turned it into this series of questions where they can then use that on their own life.
yeah, it's sort of an invitation. It's a way to begin reflecting on your own life. You know, whether you're at midlife, I mean, we all reach significant stages in our life. Late 20s, early 30s, significant stage. Late 40s, early 50s, significant stage. Same thing, late 60s. There's the Saturn returns of the late 20s and the late 50s. But we all go through hero's journey. Sometimes it's a result of a divorce, or the diagnosis of an illness, or the loss of a loved one, or being laid off at a job, that sort of thrusts us into this period of reflection and reassessing and descent, right, where we go down, and suddenly we're sort of mulling around trying to figure out where we are. And so I wanted to include questions at the end, deeper, thoughtful questions that the reader can ask themselves and maybe even journal about, or even get together with a small group of people, and once you've read the book, really discuss these questions over time. They're meant to be questions that that invite a deeper reflection on where you are at this time in your life, what really matters to you, what matters to your soul, um, what you've learned. I mean, a lot of what I do in this journal as well is really kind of harvest the wisdom from the first half of my life. Like, what have I learned? And what really matters to me now at this time in my life, in my early 50s, versus what I thought really mattered before, or what I behaved as though really mattered, or what I imagined was going to matter. What ultimately, and that's really where the book culminates in, here's what I learned. Here's what I've learned through this particular period of my life that I'm going to take forward into the next journal and the next experience of of living.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it really, like I said, it was really a fascinating read. And I think that because people might be used to you as, writing the self-help books, there's still self-help nuggets throughout this book. It's in a very personal format. And I think it's in a format that people can really see themselves in as you're going through your situations in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have I know you have the book there. Can you just show everybody where?
Yeah, sure. There it is.
Yay, Waking Up in Winter. And of course, it's available wherever books are sold. So just let everybody know about your website. And I know you do Facebook Lives and all of that. So where can they get more info from you?
Yeah. So CherylRichardson.com is my website. And Cheryl Richardson, Facebook.com/Cheryl Richardson is my Facebook page. And then on Twitter and Instagram, I'm Coach on Call, because my name was already taken. It's a very common name. So Coach on Call is my username for both of those. And usually I'm doing a weekly Facebook Live. Sometimes it's a coaching session where people from all over the world can, post questions in the comments, and I do live coaching with them. I've done live tapping sessions, the energy tapping work. I've done, sometimes I've had guests. But a lot of times I'm just providing live coaching for people who are just trying to live more soul-directed lives as well. So people can find me there too. Facebook, if you go to my website, you'll be able to see where I am.
Yeah.
Everywhere, YouTube, all of that sort of thing. So.
Perfect. Fantastic. Well, congratulations again on the book. And thank you so much for joining us here. And of course, thank you to everyone who is watching. And we will see you next time.